Hello and welcome. This is Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining me today. I recently got the brand new Spellbinders BetterPress letterpress system. It's a letterpress system that is compatible with the Spellbinders Platinum 6, as well as the Sizzix Big Shot machine. I'm going to be using it with my Big Shot machine. I don't have the other Spellbinders machines. I love how everything that you need to work or to use it comes in the box other than the die cutting machine. So what you're seeing in this video is me taking everything out of the box and using it all for the first time. As well as using it with the ink that comes with it, I'm going to be testing some cardstock as well as inks in my craft room just to see what works and what doesn't work. So what comes in the box is the Chase, which is the bottom white plate, and the Platen, which is the magnetic acrylic plate on top, as well as some shims that go below the mat on the Chase. I tell you, peeling that plastic off of that acrylic plate there, it was so satisfying. Anyone else feel that way? I was really impressed with how strong those magnets on the Platen are. I can actually hold that acrylic plate and lift up the entire thing. The starter kit also comes with some BetterPress plates, a little booklet to kind of guide you through for your first time, a small ink pad with ink that's especially formulated for the BetterPress plate, as well as a pack of 15 sheets of A2 cardstock. And this is cardstock that they figure is the best for these plates. And then there's a small roll of yellow tape, and that's going to be used to tape those plates or tape the paper to the Platen. So once I have my BetterPress plate off of the cardboard that it comes on, I'm going to put it on the mat. I love how that mat is marked with the size of an A2 card front as well as 5x7. There are two sentiments with that plate, and it says to my favorite person, but the favorite is spelled differently. And as a Canadian, I appreciate that it had the two spellings there because we use the Favourite. So it was nice to have that choice, and I love that Spellbinders thought of that. So for my first test, I'm going to use the ink that comes in the kit. I've already taped my piece of cardstock to the Platen, and I'm inking the plate as well as the sentiment. And the way you're supposed to ink it is tap it down and twist it just a little bit, so that's what I was doing. I did get a little bit on the background Chase, but it will clean off. It does tend to stain a tiny little bit, but not very majorly. And look at all of that beautiful detail. I just love how much detail came out of that. Now, my Sizzix machine is very well used, so it was barely any resistance going through, so I didn't get a lot of pressing into the paper. Next time I'll add a cardstock shim or two just to tighten that sandwich, but for this session I just really wanted to test out the inks and papers. So I'm using the same ink for this one, but I have some Hammermill cardstock, which is something that I use regularly with stamping and coloring images as well as foiling. So I've taped that to the Platen and inked my BetterPress plate with the ink that comes with it and putting it through my Sizzix machine. And I have to say I was super impressed with how much detail I got on this piece of cardstock as well. I can't really actually tell the difference between the Spellbinders one as well as the Hammermill. Both of them gave just a beautiful image. So the next one that I'm going to try with the same BetterPress ink is some watercolor cardstock. Because the BetterPress ink is made by Ranger, it's very similar to the archival, but apparently just a different consistency. It should be permanent, so I'm going to try some watercoloring with it. So I've got a piece of watercolor cardstock here, taped it to the Platen, inked up the BetterPress plate, and putting it through the Sizzix. And once again, the result was absolutely beautiful. Again, I can't actually really tell the difference between the images on the three different cardstocks. They both have some gorgeous, beautiful detail to them. So I'm going to clean my plate off. I'm just using some StazOn cleaner. You just want a permanent cleaner when cleaning off permanent ink. I left my plates right on the Chase to do this because it's got such a nice strong magnet that they didn't really move anywhere. The floral plate definitely didn't move anywhere. The sentiment, because it's so small and light, it did tend to move a little bit, but I didn't find I really needed to move it much. However, we'll get into this towards the end of it. You may want to remove your plates to clean it, and I'll show you why in just a little bit. So the next one that I'm using is Hammermill cardstock, and I'm just using some black Memento. I want to be able to color these images in with some Copic markers, so I want to use some Copic friendly ink, and I also like coloring on the Hammermill cardstock. So I've repeated that process just using the different ink and the different paper, and look at that, we still get such beautiful results there. Now once again, I can't tell the difference in the stamped image between the Better Press ink and the Memento ink, so you'll see me stop for a moment and I'm taking a pencil and writing it on the back so that once I'm done this, I know which inks I have on which cardstock. But it gets such beautiful detail, and I was so pleased to see that the Memento ink worked beautifully on these plates. Because that ink is just dye based, I'm just using some water to clean it off of the plate and off of the chase. I wanted to make sure to not use my permanent ink for inks that actually didn't really need it. So for my next test, I'm using Hammermill cardstock again, but this time I changed the ink to Distress ink. I just have a nice dark green Distress ink here that I think will work for coloring in both the flowers as well as the leaves. I didn't really want to choose a flower color and have the leaves outlined in it. And once again, look at that beautiful detail. Even that Distress ink just comes out absolutely gorgeous. I decided to mark it on there. I don't really know why I did. It's the only one that I did in that color, but at that moment I didn't know that. So once again, I'm cleaning off the plates with just some water from my spray bottle, and then using a rag to clean everything off. As I'm cleaning it off, I am making sure that it's completely dry before I go to work on the next piece of cardstock or the next ink pad. So once again, Hammermill here, I'm going to use some Distress Oxide. I wanted to see if the different consistency between the Distress inks made any difference at all. And once again, pleasantly surprised, I have beautiful detail here. Now that the sandwich is together, I'll run it through my Sizzix Big Shot just for that pressure to press everything down, and then remove the plate. And again, look at that beautiful detail. There was a little bubble there, but I think that was something that might have been on my Distress Oxide pad and not an issue with the printing, because any prints after that didn't have that. So it was just from that one thing. So the next test, we're going to use some black StazOn ink, and I'm doing it on some watercolor paper again. Once again, I want to do some watercoloring with this because those images are so beautifully detailed. I think they'll lend themselves really well to so many different techniques as well as watercoloring. So because StazOn ink dries really quickly, I wanted to make sure not to take my time with this one. I did it really fast. And once again, look at that gorgeous, beautiful detail on there. That is going to make such a beautiful card once it's watercolored. So after having such great luck with the white or the light cardstocks, I thought, let's just change things up. So I'm using my Distress Oxide again. This time I'm doing it on some black mixed media heavy stock. I think any black would work, but I just really love this heavy stock. It's got such a nice, beautiful black, rich, suede-y look to it that I think it'll be beautiful for these. And look at how gorgeous that image is. Now this is when I realized I was running into a tiny little bit of a problem because I was cleaning my plates, but I wasn't lifting them up. So there's a tiny little bit of moisture that got trapped underneath there, and that's what I was pointing out there. There was kind of like an ink bleed that I think is from moisture underneath my plates. So I don't think they necessarily, if you're doing a bunch of inking, if you're using the same ink, you're not going to be cleaning in between. But if you are changing up the inks, you may want to occasionally lift up your plate and dry underneath it so that you don't have anything seeping out. Next, I'm going to use some Hero Arts white pigment ink. Because that oxide works so beautifully, I thought it would be perfect to have a white image on a black background. So we repeated the same process once again, put it through my Sizzix Big Shot machine for that pressure, and just take a look at how beautiful that turned out. So stunning. Once again, a little bit of seepage from the moisture there, but other than once I put embossing powder on there and there's a little shiny area, you don't actually even notice it. And you don't even need to put the embossing powder on here. I just thought, you know what, because it's pigment ink, it stays wet for a little while. I wonder if I could emboss it, and I could absolutely emboss it. Now, really, I just chose clear embossing powder over white ink. You can emboss it with whatever color, and I will do that in just a moment. And what I was pointing to there was there's that little bit of clear that's not on top of ink because of water seeping out. So now I've got some Hammermill cardstock again, and I'm just using my Versamark pad, repeating the same process. Once it comes off of the plate, you're actually not going to see any image on there simply because of the fact that it is the clear Versamark ink on there. But I wanted to just try it with the Versamark ink and then emboss with it. Because the Versamark pad is so spongy, I wasn't sure if I would still get a nice clean image from it, and I absolutely did. So I added some gold embossing powder, and then I'm going to take my embossing tool and I'm going to melt that powder. I think this would work beautifully for some really nice elegant cards. You could use whatever color embossing powder you want to, but it just kind of even elevates such a detailed image to it. So I'm not going to do any complete cards here. This was more about just testing all the papers and the inks I had. I'll do some future videos with these pieces, turning them into complete cards. And in my next video, I'm going to try foiling with these Better Press plates. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a fantastic day.